When you get to be as prolific a game studio as Rare, you get a lot of people talking about you. Your highs, your lows, everything in between, but sometimes there's parts of your history that tend to get overblown, or they're just outright wrong. Rare's had a lot of tall tales surrounding them in their games, with quite a few persisting for decades. But today we're tackling some of the most popular, where they may have come from, and closing the book on them for good to try and stop the misinfo from spreading. I looked high and low in my research efforts, and a big chunk of stuff came from the Rare magazine, made in 2017 for Rare staff to celebrate the studio's 15th year with Microsoft. It's got developer interviews and all kinds of cool tidbits I haven't seen anywhere else. A big thanks goes out to the website Rare Gamer, seemingly the only place out there that preserved this. Where they got it from, I don't know, but that's not important. Let's get going already. On to the first debunking, and it revolves around the studio's very name. Many fans of Rare's work from the mid-90s to early 2000s commonly refer to them as Rareware, reflecting their then-current logo, but the studio itself never actually went under that name. In a post on their fan letters page called Scribes, dated June 19th, 2000, ooh, what a great date! Someone asked if the studio's name was Rare or Rareware, with the site's writer and designer Lee Loveday saying it was the former, and Rareware referring to their games. This is supported in the games themselves, most of them having the phrase Game by Rare in a copyright section or the credits. Other places, like Nintendo.com back in the day, did the same. Rareware is nowhere to be seen. Just Rare, or more formally, Rare Limited. Little bit of history with the Rareware logo's usage. It debuted in 1994's Killer Instinct and was phased out by 2003. Star Fox Adventures was the last home console game to use it, and it showed up in 2 Game Boy Advance games, the Donkey Kong Country 1 remake and Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge. It was also seen at E3 2003 and in ads for Grab by the Ghoulies and Conker Live and Uncut, some of which got updated with their next logo. An old cameo trailer used it too, as well as the 03 build of Diddy Kong Pilot, with an angelic choir to boot. When Ghoulies came out in October 03, they'd simply go by Rare from then on, revamping their logo several times since. For the next clearing of misconceptions, let's go over the big old Microsoft buyout and some of the events that led up to it. According to the Rare magazine, it has its roots in the holiday season of '97 with a little game called Diddy Kong Racing. It was a smash hit and got a lot of eyes on it, with one pair belonging to Ed Fries, vice president of Microsoft's game publishing. He scouted talent far and wide for the original Xbox, being a key part in netting Bungie and Ensemble Studios. Fries liked Rare's style and wanted to work with them too, which seemed unlikely since they were partnered with Nintendo. Even still, a few years before the eventual sale, he visited Rare and met up with some of the staff, including founders Chris and Tim Stamper. They got to know each other better, kept an open mind, and, well, you know what happened next. Come the 2000s, games got more expensive to make, and if a studio was gonna survive, financial stability was pretty good to have. Nintendo owned 49% of Rare and could have bought them outright, but declined. That's when Rare told Microsoft what happened, and after talking some more, they offered to buy Rare for $300 million, which Fries says was the value Nintendo said nuts to. And then Activision came into the mix and outbid them, but Microsoft wasn't having that, and Xbox chief Robbie Box sealed the deal with $375 million. Again, Rare was okay with this. Rare exec Lee Schuneman recalls having a company vote for which offer they preferred and everyone choosing Microsoft. A big factor in that was they'd continue working with a console maker under Xbox, giving them a better understanding of the hardware they'd be making games for. It's also been said a deal Nintendo made with Disney in '99 was a factor in Rare not being hung up on finding greener pastures. That deal centering on a certain mouse. Through his usual investigative work, co-founder of DK Vine Hyle Russell notes Rare staff, Stampers included, weren't crazy about working on Mickey Mouse games for a few years. And I think this commercial right here illustrates their feelings best.
Mickey's Racing Adventure on Game Boy Color.
A press release said they'd make a racer for Game Boy Color in '99, one for Game Boy Color and N64 in 2000, and an adventure game for GBC and Home Console in '01, all coming out for their respective Christmas seasons. While the first two came out as scheduled, mostly, that last one never got made, at least not by Rare. 2002 saw Magical Mirror hit the GameCube, done by Capcom. And if you wondered why this was a Nintendo-published, Miyamoto-produced affair, it's a leftover from that deal. It also connected with the GBA remake of Magical Quest, so they sort of filled their quota there too. But back to the Microsoft deal, and interjecting with another debunk, everyone knew the one IP that wasn't tagging along was Donkey Kong. There's that one story where a Microsoft exec visited Rare, saw some DK posters on the wall and thought, hey, do we own Donkey Kong now? A story that was recalled by Chris Seaver, but he clarified that it was just one guy, a bland gray exec out for a free jolly to the UK, not the whole company. The Rare magazine says Robbie Bach knew Rare's Golden Goose was owned by Nintendo, saying they did have to think twice, as everything they'd be getting would be all new from that point on, but ultimately they were cool with that. Now, why did Nintendo pass on Rare, you ask? Well, depends on who you ask, but an article from Nintendo Official Magazine makes it clear they didn't see much of a future with them, partly due to their current output, or lack thereof. Rare made up 9.5% of Nintendo's business in 2001, which dropped to 1.5% the next year as their GameCube and GBA games fell behind schedule. Cameo got delayed, Star Fox missed 2 deadlines, and Donkey Kong Racing didn't exist outside of a trailer. Talking with Electronic Gaming Monthly, Nintendo marketing chief George Harrison, no, not the Beatle, settle down Heil, notes how Rare was one of the first studios to receive GameCube dev kits, which kinda stung when they were MIA for its launch. He also said it left a software gap post-launch that wouldn't be filled till Mario Sunshine dropped, and looking at their big exclusives, yeah, they were starved for the first half of 02. There's some good games here for sure, just not much that screams, you gotta buy this thing like right now, especially not in Harrison's eyes. For delayed GBA games, you had Saberwolf, Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers, and Diddy Kong Pilot, the latter Nintendo outright refusing to publish. Among other things, they thought flying planes on flat courses was kinda dumb, which, fair? Though some Rare staff felt they were just being uptight due to the looming sale. Every non-DK game Rare made for Nintendo's handhelds was published by THQ going forward. Nintendo was also focusing less on Western studios in favor of Japanese ones, kind of a 180 from the N64 days. Leftfield Productions was a casualty of this. They were second party from 98 to 02 with exclusives like Excitebike 64, the NBA courtside games, and some licensed tie-ins, one being outlined in that aforementioned Disney deal. After Courtside 02 came out that January, it was rumored Leftfield split with Nintendo and went independent, which was confirmed that September. Same month the Rare sale went public. Before this, they were also making a sequel to 1080 Snowboarding, which started on N64, moved to GameCube, and was ultimately salvaged by internal studio Nintendo Software Technology, coming out as 1080 Avalanche. Quick aside, over on Scribes, when asked about Donkey Kong Racing being canned, Lee Loveday theorized if it was far enough along, Nintendo could have found another studio to finish it in Rare's absence, and Avalanche is proof of that theory. Leftfield's games showed up on Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo platforms for a few years after this, but in 2011, they sadly closed their doors. And if you've been paying attention to how things go in the industry, in retrospect, their death shouldn't have come out of left field. Sorry, had to say it. Alright, now let's break down some long-standing Conker rumors. First off, Nintendo hating Bad Fur Day. Some think they wanted nothing to do with Conker after his mature makeover, but they supported it as much as they could while keeping their image intact. According to VideoBusiness.com, Bad Fur Day had a marketing budget of $5 million, $1 million more than the original Paper Mario and Mario Tennis GBC, and tied with the budget for the Oracle Zelda games. Granted, those all sold better than Bad Fur Day, but Nintendo still had faith in it. According to fansite Mundo Rare, George Harrison expected it to sell 1 million units, but it didn't even get a tenth of that. IGN theorized that was due to Nintendo making sure the only people who know about it were adults still invested in the N64. And in 2001, that was not a big audience, especially with GameCube on the horizon. Ah well. Now for some dirt on Conker's cancelled sequel, plus development stories on Bad Fur Day's remake, Live and Reloaded. Much of this info came from Conker programmer Chris Marlowe in an interview with the channel Sola and Cola, which I highly recommend watching. For a Conker sequel, they had some ideas brewing along with a full story outline, but things didn't get much farther than that. Contrary to popular belief, Microsoft didn't axe this project. Rather, it was the Conker team who put it on hold. They had worked on Conker since '96, and by '02 were getting pretty sick of squirrels, so they worked on other things in the meantime. By the turn of the millennium, live games were extremely popular, with stuff like Quake 3 Arena and the original Team Fortress. Chris Seaver played a lot of the latter and wanted to make his own version of that. He took Bad Fur Day's multiplayer and got working on a prototype for Xbox Live, with Marlo helping out in his free time. The two Chris's pitched a live Conker game to the Stampers, who worried that since Xbox Live was still new, there would be no install base. They went, no way we're shipping this without a single player, and the Conker team went, no way we're making a whole new single player. Ultimately, they decided to remake Bad Fur Day, to give it a second shot at life, iron out gameplay kinks, etc. Talking with Rare Extreme, Seaver said work on Reloaded started, quote, the day we got bought, not a moment before. Also, here's some footage of Rare and Microsoft's audio teams in Idaho, recording sound effects for the game's weapons, and petting a few goats along the way. Reloaded, then known as Live and Uncut, was touted as a souped-up Bad Fur Day, quote, expanded with extra footage that didn't make the original cut. Marlo said they considered adding a new chapter and some more movie parodies, but there was an issue with that. See, Microsoft makes big bucks, and lots of people want a piece of that pie by suing the pants off of them. It doesn't take much to find them wrapped up in some kind of lawsuit. For Bad Fur Day's parodies, the team didn't ask permission to do them, they just threw caution to the wind. Nintendo's legal team told them as long as it fell under parody, it should be fine, and nothing ever happened. As Reloaded was a remake, it fell under prior art law, basically meaning you didn't sue us then, you can't sue us now because it's the same product. If the remake changed too much, they'd open themselves up to legal issues, even with parody on their side. Still, the spooky chapter in particular got a big overhaul, with Conker even wearing a Van Helsing outfit, spoofing the 2004 movie of the same name. Reloaded's also infamous for having more censored language than Bad Fur Day in a twisted sense of irony, but Marlo said that came from Microsoft wanting to push Xbox as a family system. I know that sounds odd given its hardcore reputation, but Xbox had its share of family-friendly games. Out of the nearly 1,000 OG Xbox games, about 2/3 weren't rated M, and roughly 380 had some form of E gracing the box, so 40% of that lineup was kid-friendly. Not even counting those weird T games before E10 came along, like Digimon, Tom and Jerry, or Shrek. In addition, they also had their Platinum Family Hits line for your mascot platformers, licensed fare, that kind of stuff. And yes, I'm not sure how toning down a mature game makes sense in that regard, but welcome to the games industry. Microsoft had official rules for what the Conker team couldn't say or do, and Marlo chalked that up to them being new to the games business. If Conker was made a few years later, he thinks the swearing would be a non-issue, but he regrets not pushing harder to keep it in. Language aside though, Reloaded keeps everything else and is actually cruder than Bad Fur Day in a few places. The Great Mighty Pooh flips the bird here, and an execution scene cut from Bad Fur Day, which was seen in a trade show demo, is restored here as well. Reloaded's multiplayer also has uncut swearing, unlockable after beating story mode. Single player had an uncensored code too, but Seaver said that would have been enough for big retailers to refuse selling the game. Like Bad Fur Day on N64, Reloaded released at the end of the Xbox's life and didn't sell great, but Marlo said it did better than Bad Fur Day and was very popular on Xbox Live. According to XBL programming director Larry Herb, it stayed in the top 10 for OG Xbox games in '07 through the 360's backwards compatibility. Going back to that Rare Extreme interview, the question of other Bad Day was brought up, with Seaver saying there were no current plans for it, but he did have something else in mind. Quote, if the chips fall my way, then the next game I'll be working on will be something a bit different, although still involving squirrels and teddies. If Conker's in it, it'll be just to kill him off, in the opening sequence. We later learned this game was Conker Gettin' Medieval, their second crack at an online Conker game, but that was cancelled too. As for Conker 2's demise, Seaver said that was on him. Talking to Eurogamer, he said they had something on the OG Xbox, Microsoft wanted it on the upcoming 360, and he didn't want to spend 2 more years on something they'd been making for almost 2 years already. As for a Conker game that did come out, there's Young Conker for the HoloLens. Backlash to Conker's design here was so negative, some think the whole game was canned because of it. Truthfully, it was released in January 2016, but no major outlet covered it and the HoloLens cost thousands of dollars, so your average Joe wasn't grabbing it either. I've heard from folks who have managed to play it that it's not bad, good even, but Conker just can't catch a break finding an audience who will actually buy his games, can he? Maybe the sixth time's the charm. Okay, on to the Thriller Gorilla himself. Let's clear this one up once and for all. Shigeru Miyamoto, the father of Donkey Kong, apparently had issues with Rare's take on his baby when they made Donkey Kong Country. According to games journalist Stephen Kent, who did a double interview with Miyamoto and Tim Stamper, Miyamoto apparently said Donkey Kong Country proves players will put up with mediocre gameplay as long as the art is good. The quote allegedly came from the May 95 issue of Electronic Games magazine. You can find it on the Internet Archive, but spoiler warning, the quote isn't in there. Stamper and Miyamoto talk about tech and game design, but no one's taking jabs at each other's work. The quote was also in Kent's 2001 book, The Ultimate History of Video Games, as well as the G4 documentary show Icons. Kent shows up in the Donkey Kong episode and brings up his interview, describing Miyamoto as ruthless, with Stamper taking it like a quintessential English gentleman. Bringing up the alleged quote here, however, Kent words it a bit differently.
Miyamoto said things like, Donkey Kong Country proves that Americans will buy a game with mediocre gameplay as long as the graphics are excellent.
Americans, huh? I think that paints an even worse picture for Miyamoto. Even my Canadian self feels offended hearing that. This episode came out in 2004, so Kent's recalling decade-old memories here, but no matter how you slice it, this sounds wildly unprofessional. Why would someone as respected as Miyamoto openly bash a studio he worked with the co-founder right beside him? Why would said studio continue to work with a man who did that? Looking up other interviews with Miyamoto, he's had nothing but nice to say about Rare.
Is there any other games that are coming out from Nintendo that you're excited about?
今度のショーに出てるレアのいくつかの作品、Banjo Kazooie.
I believe you have already seen some of the rare games like Banjo Kazooie. They are great.
How is it different in America as compared to Japan? How are games treated differently?
僕は区別しないで考えてるつもりなんですよ。けどやっぱり売れるゲームの傾向は違うみたいですけども、僕自身とは全然変わらないと思います。
Well, when I'm making video games, I'm not making in terms of the difference between American or Japanese people at all. There may be some difference, but when I'm making video games, I'm not thinking about any difference.
In the N64 days, he felt that aside from Nintendo, they were the best studio out there making unique games. And here he is in Perfect Dark, someone who dunked on the game that made you a household name and you immortalize him in one of your projects. I can't see the logic there. Miyamoto also championed Donkey Kong Country getting revived, and we eventually got returns from that. After that game was announced, he was asked about his thoughts on the original DKC. And on June 17th, 2010, he clarified he liked it, worked closely with Rare on it, and emailed Tim Stamper almost every day until it was done. So what even caused Miyamoto to say that alleged quote in the first place? Well, it apparently came from him getting backlash to the art style from 1995's Yoshi's Island, again brought up in Kent's book. Miyamoto served as its producer, but according to a 2021 dev interview, it was the brainchild of Yoshi's creator Shigefumi Hino, and while a hand-drawn look was decided early on, the final art style came from Hisashi Nogami, who joined the project just as DKC came out. Some within Nintendo wanted Yoshi to look like DKC, but it was too late to change it, and the team used Yoshi's visuals as sort of a fun take that to Donkey Kong. The game's co-director Takashi Tezuka backs this up in a 95 interview, and no one seems upset with Donkey Kong in any of this. Somehow, this story got attributed to Miyamoto. Back then, if his name was on something, he got all the glory, even if all he did was tell someone to make a game for him. In Kent's book, he also brings up the Yoshi games released before Yoshi's Island, claiming he didn't like any of them and thought they weren't authentic. I wonder if Game Freak knew that when they made Yoshi, which Miyamoto produced, at the same time he was helping them with Pokemon. You think he told them, not only did I not like your Yoshi game, it was a dime store knockoff of a series that doesn't even exist yet. Again, I just can't see the logic. Before debunking our last big rumor, let's do a lightning round clearing up a few smaller ones. First one, Banjo-Tooie was shown at Space World 2000. No, this was a tech demo for the GameCube specs alongside snippets of Conker and Perfect Dark. Plus, Space World 2000 happened months before Tooie released anywhere. Number 2, Banjo 3 was being made on GameCube at some point. Nope, the Banjo team went right into Grabbed by the Ghoulies after Tooie. Some think Grunty's line at the end of Tooie was sequel bait, but series director Greg Mayles said it was just a joke. Number 3, Ghoulies is a Luigi's Mansion knockoff. Guess again, the team had no clue it existed when they started making Ghoulies. Director Greg Mayles hasn't even played it as of 2020. They take place in a haunted house, and the similarities end there. With that logic, Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights is ripping off Resident Evil. Number 4, Rare devs went to work at Retro Studios. False. Personally, I'd find it strange a bunch of UK-based devs would flock to Texas for their next career move rather than staying local, but there's a tiny shred of truth in this rumor. One, count 'em, one dev, Rice Lewis, worked at Rare from 97 to 2000, then at Retro from 07 to 2013. Longtime Rare composer Grant Kirkhope also applied to Retro, but for him, no cigar. Speaking of Kirkhope, number 5. The DK64 track Creepy Castle has an homage to the original Donkey Kong. This one's also false. Asking Kirkhope myself, he said it wasn't on his mind when he wrote the song. In addition, the first minute of it was composed before he even worked at Rare. Number 6, Dinosaur Planet was changed to SFA due to the impending sale. Nope, the change began shortly after E3 2000, 2 full years before the sale. It's also false the IP change was forced on Rare. All parties agreed to it, and staff have fond memories working with Nintendo on it. Talking to Nintendo Life, lead software engineer Phil Tossell called it the most trusting and respectful relationship he ever had in the games industry. And lastly, Microsoft is evil. No. The relationship wasn't perfect and everyone has different opinions, but ultimately Microsoft wanted Rare to succeed because it was beneficial to everyone. In 2017, ex-Rare dev Gavin Price talked to Eurogamer about his time there and cleared up some rumors himself. One was how Kinect wasn't suggested to them by Microsoft, but Rare's upper management. Microsoft just supported their decisions. Price also had this to say: every company makes mistakes, and people forgive certain companies more than others. We all love Nintendo so much, we can forgive them for whatever they do. We'll always forgive them the day the next Zelda comes around. Everybody likes to create this narrative that Microsoft are evil, but that's not the case. They were very supportive. I guess there were a few people who have since left who thought, I wanted to be working on this game or my pet project, and I didn't get to. And they've kind of painted a picture that it's all Microsoft's fault. I had to bring this quote up because that Nintendo forgiveness thing, yeah, it happens a lot. And now we've saved the biggest debunking for last. The claim of a massive staff walkout after the buyout, often paired with the phrase, all the good people left after 2002. A Bloomberg article says 50 devs left after Perfect Dark shipped and another 30 post-buyout. But reading this for myself, it's way more opinionated than it is objective. It also claims Banjo-Tooie was poorly received, Bad Fur Day wasn't funny, shocking, or inspired, and Donkey Kong 64 was one of the worst things Rare ever produced, which is not what most critics were saying about these games, especially when they came out. Back to that employee exodus, game teams back then were pretty small. In 2018, Greg Mayles posted on Twitter about the games he worked on and their team sizes. Nothing before 06's Viva Pinata had a team size bigger than 20. The staff that left were part of the Bond team, who made GoldenEye and its spiritual successor Perfect Dark. Their exits happened from late 98 to early 99, and you could count this exodus on one hand and one finger. It was 6 guys, 5 of which went to form Free Radical, the studio behind Time Splitters. Anyway, 6 guys was half of the Bond team, right in the middle of PD's development, but things worked out for that game in the end. If 50 people left after shipping a game, that's 4 whole teams gone, which is pretty much all they had back then. That probably would have sunk the studio, or at the very least be newsworthy. I haven't seen this claim anywhere else save this one article with no sources. During my research, I hit up Rare alumni Chris Alcock, who worked there from Ghoulies to Sea of Thieves, has worked with them in a freelance role in more recent years, and is also an online chum of mine who likes my stuff for some reason. Thanks so much, Chris. Anyhow, thinking about this supposed walkout, he said the following. 50 seems implausible to say the least. I've no idea on the specifics, but that article is so busy being peak, Rare was never good actually. It can't even manage basic proofreading, so I take everything it claims with a pinch of salt. Or hell, a bowlful. The piece is certainly not lacking in salt. All that felt pretty definitive, but then someone alerted me to Rare's Group of Companies account on Companies House, a government agency that registers info on UK-based companies which is available to the public. According to their documents, Rare had 180 staff members in 1999, and in 2000 that number went up to 199. In 2001, it rose to 208, and from the start of 02 until June 03, it was 193 on average. Now, you could argue they made up the difference by hiring a bunch of people in their stead, but there's no proof of that, so I'm not buying it. 80 people did not leave Rare. But more on the crew that did and their reasons for doing so, which was talked about in great pieces from Nintendo Life and Eurogamer in 2020 for PD's 20th anniversary. Those who left said it was partially due to the culture of Rare at the time, which included insane work hours. If you worked at Rare back then, you worked every waking moment, and while overtime wasn't necessary, it was expected. As Martin Hollis put it, there was no respect given to anyone who did 9 to 5, I'm afraid to say. As GoldenEye progressed, a few guys were doing 100-hour work weeks, and many will admit this was completely reckless, but for a lot of them, they just wanted to work on stuff. Most Rare staff in the 90s were young guys straight out of school who didn't have commitments like families, plus they were out in the middle of nowhere Twycross. With those factors, there wasn't much else to do but work on projects they were extremely passionate about. But at the end of the day, and long after that, they were still human, with David Doak saying the Bond team had a love-hate relationship with Rare. They got paid handsomely for their work, like houses and cars money, but they wanted their careers to mean more than big bonuses. Doak said Rare had a 3-tier class system and the Bond team was at the bottom. After shipping GoldenEye, Rare's biggest hit until Sea of Thieves mind you, they thought things had changed, but at the bottom they stayed, and that was the last straw. They had aspirations bigger than make another hit for Rare and don't think about life outside these walls. I should stress there's no real bad guy in any of this. Folks just did what made the most sense to them, and nowadays, it's all water under the bridge. Everyone at Rare has their own story to tell, but for the ex-Bond guys, especially in the moment, they felt things could have been better there. And to bring up the everyone left after 2002 bit, a number of folks were still there during and after the sale, and quite a few are still around today. There are folks who have been there for 20, 25, 30, 35 years. QA manager Hugh Ward has been there for 40 plus years, starting before Rare was even called Rare. But that said, no studio stays the same forever. People come and go, things change, it's just the nature of things. I'm just happy Rare's managed to be around for as long as they have and still maintain creative freedom, never tied down to one thing for very long. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this studio's got plenty of stories, and I wanted to help clear some of them up. Just remember this, people like to exaggerate details, add their own personal opinions to things, make their own narratives, or just flat out lie about stuff. So if you read or watch something and the info sounds a bit dodgy to you, maybe do your own research and get the facts straight. And if you see someone repeat any of the rumors mentioned here, maybe send this video their way. We all gotta do our part to make sure tall tales like these get stamped out for good. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really do appreciate it. And a very special thanks goes out to Rare Gamer for their archiving work, DK Vine for their expert sleuthing, Chris Alcock for being Chris Alcock, and everyone else who helped make this video possible. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, share with a friend, subscribe, check out all my socials, all that stuff I always go on about. And if you want to see videos like these before they go live, alongside behind the scenes goodies and maybe even a verbal shout out, feel free to check out my Patreon page. Speaking of which, I want to thank Lars Niswant and TerraDrive for their support. It really does mean more than you know. Thanks so much, guys. And while you're here, feel free to check out the videos I got on screen. I really enjoyed making them. Hopefully you'll enjoy watching them. And with all that said, I will see you guys next time. Later!